Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to our next topic, that is your essay 620, that is using work of an auditor expert. So these notes you will find them in our Telegram channel. Link is in the description, and this will be a purely English lecture. Okay, so let's start with essay 620. So an individual or organization possessing expertise in fields other than whose work is used by the auditor to assist the auditor in obtaining sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. This is your definition of an audit expert. That is, if your auditor is not and does not have expertise in a particular area, in such a case he will use the work of a audit expert. So areas where work of auditor experts can be used. First is valuation of complex financial instruments, land and building, plant and machinery, or jewelry. Okay, next is valuation of environment liabilities and site cleanup cost. Of course, your auditor might not have an idea about this. Then this should be actually third. Third is your estimation of oil and gas reserves. These are highly technical areas. And fourth is your analysis of unusual tax compliances issues. In such, these are examples where auditor might use the help of a external audit expert. Procedures to be followed while using work of auditors expert. So what procedures need to be done? First is factors influencing auditor's decision with respect to use of audit evidence when management has used a expert. That is, what factors will influence the auditor's decision with regards to audit evidence when the management has used an expert. So first will be your nature, scope and objectives of management experts work. Second is your whether management expert employed by entity or is a party engaged to it to provide relevant services. That is, whether it is within the entity or is it a third party. If it is a third party, you will be able to place greater reliance on the expert. Third is the extent to which management can exercise control or influence over the work of management expert. If they can influence, significant influence on his work, in such a case he will not be able to exercise independence. And fourth is the management expert's competence and capabilities. You will have to check the management expert's competence and capability. That is, whether the expert, is he competent, is he capable, does he have the necessary skills to perform this work. Okay, next is obtaining an understanding of the expert work. You will have to understand what work does he perform. To enable auditor to determine nature, scope and on objectives of expert's work, he will have to first understand the NTE of the expert work. And second is evaluate the adequacy of that work for auditor's purpose. Once he has assessed how much work and whether it is reliable or not, whether he is capable to do so or not, he will check as to how much of the expert's work can the auditor use in his workings, in his procedures. If the expert work is not adequate for audit purpose, if the auditor concludes that the work of the expert is not adequate, so in such a case the auditor cannot resolve the matter through additional audit procedures. He may express a modified opinion. That means he cannot even use the management expert's work, nor can he make any additional audit procedures. Then in such a case he can modify the opinion. And agreement with the auditor's expert, it needs to be in writing. So whatever agreement you enter into, it should be in writing. The nature, scope and objective of the auditor's expert work, as to what nature and scope that will the expert cover. Second is respective role and responsibilities of auditor and auditor's expert. That is, what is his roles and responsibilities. All of this needs to be in the agreement. And third is your nature, time and extent of communication, including form of report, as in what form the report will be provided. Okay. And next is your factor suggesting need for a written agreement with the expert, in which cases you need a written agreement with your expert. So your first is if he has access to any sensitive confidential entity information. Your second is your multi-jurisdictional legal or regulatory requirements apply. So in case of any legal or regulatory requirements. Next is your matters to which auditor's expert work relate is highly complex. So if the work is highly complex, in such a case you should have a written agreement. And your next is auditor has not previously used work performed by the expert. That is, if it is the first time, then it is always better to have a written agreement with the expert. Okay. Next is your nature, time, and extent of audit procedures depends on, that is, your audit procedures will depend upon, first is your nature of the matter to which the expert's work relates, that is, which area, what is the nature where we are using the experts, auditor experts work. Second is the risk of material misstatement in the matter to which the expert work relates. Higher the risk, lower, more will be your NTE of audit procedures. Third is significance of the expert's work in the context of the audit, that is how important is the expert's work. Fourth is your factor suggesting need for different or extensive procedures. Okay, so factor suggesting need for different or extensive procedures. Work of auditor expert relates to a significant matter that involves substantive and complex judgments. So, in which cases will you require extensive procedures? So, when the matters relate to subjective and complex judgments. Okay, then next, the auditor has not previously used work of audit expert and has no prior knowledge of that expert competence, capabilities, and objectivity. So if you do not know the expert, if you have not used work of expert, he is as good as a stranger to you. So you're doing it for the first time. And your third is the audit expert. The audit evidence is performing procedures that are integral to the audit, that is, this is your AE over here is your audit expert. So your audit expert is performing procedures that are integral to the audit, that is, they are important to the audit, rather than being consulted to provide advice on an individual matter. Okay, so these are the cases where your nature, time, and extent of your audit procedures will depend on what factors. Okay, and coming to the last part of this standard is reference to the auditor's expert in the auditor's report. So no reference required in case of an unmodified audit report. So if everything is good, if there are no issues, you need not provide any reference of the expert unless it is required by your laws and regulations. However, in case of a modified report, it may be appropriate to refer to the auditor's expert to explain the nature of the modification. You will have to explain, boss, why am I modifying the report? So you will also have to give the expert's reference. In such a case, auditor may need permission of the auditor's expert before making such a reference. You have to take their permission ki boss, in my audit report I am going to name you. Is that okay or not? And once he provides his acceptance, you can give the same in the audit report. Great. So with this also we are done with essay 620, and I'll see you in the next class.